everybody, this is Freddy with FreddyCanFly, and in today's video we are going to do the final build steps for the Specter 700, and this will be essentially the final assembly for the main gear and the tail, doing things like tensioning the belt, getting the main rotor finally seated in. Afterwards we can go ahead and take a look at a final review. And if you guys have followed along, again, we have not been doing the electronics install. I'm going to do that once everything is completed. This machine's designed in a way that I don't think we need to split the frames and get inside and do all the internal wiring. We should be able to access everything that we need, from the motor to ESC to the servos, battery packs, everything down to the flat barless system. It looks like we can do it externally, and there is enough wiggle room inside and everything to do it all internally. So let's go ahead and focus on getting the final parts mated. The next step in the process is going to be getting the main gear and the tail gear or tail pulley fully assembled. So what I'm going to do is we'll get it all taken apart just to make sure, we get the Loctite on everything. We'll get everything greased up in here. We'll throw on the tail. We'll put on the boom supports. We'll do all that fun stuff. Again, the tail linkage rod I'm going to go ahead and do when I do the servo installation and the programming. So we'll save that, but yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at the first step. Let's get on our way so we can get this thing fully assembled. Alrighty guys, so getting underway, the next step as shown in the manual. If you guys didn't catch my last video, again, they did update the manual, so we are looking at some new references just in case anything looks a little bit different. Let me go ahead and throw this step up on screen right now. And it looks like this will be for the actual main gear portion. It does, in the bag, it comes with the tail pulley and a little spacer, but let's go ahead. We'll set these to the side for a moment. We'll find out what they're used for. Essentially, like any, main gear, whether it be electric or nitro nowadays, you've got your one-way bearing in the center, a bunch of bolts around the outside. Everything in the one-way bearing should be already pressed in and pre-seated. I'm not going to try to take all the bearings and stuff out, but I am going to make sure that I thoroughly grease the one-way bearing. It's a very important step. It can be overlooked at sometimes, and it can cause one-way bearing failures. Metal rubbing on metal does nothing more than cause heat, which causes expansion and contraction, which equals wear and tear and premature failure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the steps here. I'm basically just going to remove all the bolts here. Let's make sure that they're fully Loctited. They do go from top side to bottom. It is metal into metal, so we want to Loctite these. And then I'm just going to use the same white lithium grease. We'll get the one-way bearing thoroughly greased up, and we can set that assembly to the side. The second set of instructions, which I'll throw up on the screen now, it looks as though this will now be for the tail pulley for the front side. Kind of a different design. I do see a lot of machines where the main gear sits on top and the belt drive is on the bottom. Also, the pin, for the main shaft and main gear is usually done through the bottom of the main gear. But this one's a little different. This will be sitting on top as compared to on bottom. But kind of the same deal. We've got 4 metal into metal screws. We'll thoroughly clean with rubbing alcohol. We'll Loctite them. Make sure you guys don't wrench these down and cause any distortion or anything like that, because when this is spinning, we want it to spin as true as possible to eliminate any vibrations or wear and tear on the belt. And then, of course, you've got the main, I guess you'd call it the bottom Jesus bolt. There's a bunch of different names for them. We'll just kind of leave that in finger tight, but we will remove it once we're ready to install into the machine. So I'm going to do these 2 steps. Let's get this fully constructed and fully greased, and we will come back and move on to the next step. Alrighty guys, so I've went ahead and done the proper steps to prep and get everything ready. I know it's probably really hard for you to even tell, but when I say grease the main, or the one-way, I mean, I really grease it. I get in there and I brush its teeth, with grease just like crazy. It makes a bit of a mess. One thing to note is, again, in the manual, which I'll throw the slides up, it shows that this is going to be riding on top of the radial bearing here. And I did notice there's a bit of a difference. The top bearing does have a bit of an inlay or a groove. And you can see on the tail pulley here that it does have a bit of a groove. So I'm assuming those seat in on each other so that the radial bearing can do its thing. So what I did is I did actually apply a little bit of excessive grease around the top here. That way when those two parts kind of meet together and start doing their thing, there's a little bit of lubrication. I didn't really apply it on the bottom because I don't think it needs it. But if you'd like to, feel free to do so. From what I understand is this little shim will be sitting on the bottom of the main gear. So anywho, the next step that we're going to be taking a look at, let's throw it up on the screen here. Looks like we're going to be doing kind of the final assembly. Now take in mind, guys, the way that you're going to want to do this, from what I can tell, is the boom's got to go in first so that the belt can sit idly. That way when we install everything, we'll be able to throw in the tail pulley part first, get that over the belt. Then we'll slide in the main gear, and I'm going to kind of jimmy the main shaft down as I do it. And then there's a little shim it specifies in the manual that has to go underneath. That might be a little tricky to get in, but we're going to give it a try. And you'll kind of jimmy that in underneath too, and then you can go ahead and seat the main shaft all the way down and then apply your Jesus bolt and lock it in. Don't worry so much about belt tension right now, as that'll come into play once we get the final assembly done. What we'll end up doing is pulling back the boom, and then we'll go ahead and lock the boom down and do the pins. And I'll make sure we go over that step. Another thing to note, guys, when you go ahead and install this in, just to make your life easy, try to look down the boom and make sure your belt is nice and straight, because when we install it into the machine, you're going to have to give it a slight twist. As always, we're running a clockwise main rotor, so the twist, I think, on the belt should be counterclockwise. That way the rotation of the clockwise main gear is going to give us a counterclockwise tail rotor. Again, pretty common knowledge, but for those of you that may or may not know this information, keep that in mind, because it's going to be a pain. If you get the tail belt rotation wrong, you got to disassemble everything, go back, do it all over again. So it's a little bit harder for me to film this on the bench, so I might have to go into handheld mode here in just a moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the boom installed, and I'll kind of roughly put in the main gear and the shim and everything, and see if I can give you guys a little bit more hands-on with putting in the main shaft. It may or may not work, so let me play around with some options, and we'll come back with a final overall look at everything. So let me get that step completed as per the manual, and then we'll come back and move on. Hey guys, also one quick side note to address before we go ahead and get this final assembly done. I did make a separate video that demonstrates this for not only this machine, but any machine out there, and it talks about using the main shaft in the actual build when you lock down all of your bearing blocks and everything. That's going to make sure that the frames not only stay nice and true, but any imperfections in the frames are not going to affect the overall rotation of the main rotor. And basically what I mean is this: before you even bother putting in the main gear, putting in the tail or anything else, your main shaft should literally be this smooth. Alright, there should be absolutely zero resistance in it. If I set it in there, I'm going to try not to drop it here. If I set it in, it should drop right in, and then as it goes through those other bearings, it should be that smooth. Okay, there should be absolutely no resistance in any of your blocks. If there is, if you have to push at all, or you're getting any of like the skidding where it kind of goes like grrr, what you're going to want to do is get that main shaft in all the way, loosen up all your bolts that surround all the bearing blocks, and then get this main shaft in, and then one at a time go back and lock everything back down. If your main shaft is not this smooth, do not proceed forward. Troubleshoot it until it is. Very, very important. So anyways, I wanted to address that one last time as well. Let me go ahead and get all the assembly completed. Okay guys, one more quick tip. I kind of had a bit of a struggle getting the belt to go through and not bunching up or losing its orientation while also feeding in the boom. Also, it went through this block really easy, but as I got to this one, I had to really wiggle it around and I couldn't get it to go in. So here's what I found worked the best is Once I got it in through the first block, the tail did poke out about here. So I actually just grabbed it with my thumb and tensioned it. But to get it to slide through completely smooth, similar to your main block, what I did is I actually took the Heli and I turned it, right side up, and the tail slid right in, all the way down to where it seats. And I just lightly, very, very lightly, gave it a little bit of snug with the two inner bolts here. And you can see we've got plenty of tail belt left. Now take in mind, again, this is going to have a specific rotation, which is going to be, I believe, a clockwise rotation, just 1/2 turn, and that should get my tail spinning backwards. So I'm going to keep tension on it like this with my thumb when I install the gear. The reason I'm going to do that, which, again, I don't think I have the technology here to do it one-handed, but when I do that is I'm gonna hold tension with my thumb. I'm gonna give it that one slight rotation clockwise, and then I'm gonna go ahead and feed in this, and then we'll put in the gear and everything. So that should make sure my rotation's correct. So if I'm doing it right, let me do this assembly one last time here, and let's make sure everything's correct. I just wanted to address that this was a little tricky to get in, but I think if you turn the machine right side up like this to where it's standing, vertical, the tail slid right in, and I could keep tension on the belt with my thumb. So let's get the gears in and let's take a look. Okay guys, back again one more second with another quick tip that I had found. I was able to get the belt around in the right orientation, make sure that it rides the pulleys, that way it stays straight and true there. But I was having an issue with trying to hold this in and then shuffle in the gear, and everything was kind of becoming a nightmare. So here's what I did is I actually took the main shaft, which has this collar that'll be used for fastening everything down. It's got the rotor on, but what I did is I set the collar to where I can actually just push this gear all the way up, and the main shaft does not protrude down, but it at least holds the gear in place. And then I just kind of sink the collar down a little bit so that I've got that little bit of play there. So now what I can do is I can actually just lift this up with my finger and slide in the gear. I'm thinking I might need to do the same with this because of that little shim. Where'd that little bugger go? This little shim, we got a jimmy under there. I don't want the main shaft because of how free it is, going in and out and in and out and in and out. And I've only got 2 hands, unfortunately. We weren't made with 4 or 8. So I think that's a good idea. Is I'm going to get the main gear in, and then I'll do the same thing. I'll kind of adjust this collar to where the main shaft can't go down any further, and then I can jimmy in that shim. I'll release the collar, boom, everything should seat. So I wanted to share that as I progressed with the build, guys, just in case if you're struggling or having any issues. My wife's not home to help me out right now, so I'm kind of flying solo. So this is what I came up with. Let's proceed on. I should be able to come back now, this time for sure, with the final assembly. Okay guys, so yet again, I guess today is a good day for me to be a liar or not know what the heck I'm doing, because I noticed if you put in the tail belt gear first and try to hold it with the shaft like I just demonstrated, I could not get the main gear to go in, at least with not extreme force, and I'm not looking to damage or hurt anything, and I'm assuming that's because there's a bit of an inlay between the two. So if you're having any issues, or at least hopefully you're watching the video completely through before taking your actions, take this back out, take note to the orientation of your tail belt, stack the belt drive on top of the main gear, and then slide it in, and everything went in peachy perfect. Now I just gotta go ahead and loop the belt on and then throw in the main shaft. So I'm gonna try the same practice. I mean, there's really not much room, but you can see there is that small little gap right there. I think I can jimmy the shim in. I don't feel like it'd be appropriate or really easy to do to manage the main gear, the belt drive gear, and the shim. And it even says in the instruction manual to use your fingers to align the washer to center and then go ahead and insert. So scratch that last step. I thought I was onto something, but I honestly wasn't. Well, maybe, because I'm going to use the same technique though. So now that I've got this all kind of loosely fit, what I'll do is I'll slide in the main shaft, and then I'll collar it up here so that I've got just enough room at the bottom to try to slide that little shim in. So yeah, I apologize for any frustration that may have caused, but now that we know how to do this, let's do it right. let me get this completed and we'll come back and take a look. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we have got everything fully assembled. Take in mind, yes, I do not have the boom sports on yet. I swear on my life, this is the first time I've ever seen this in a kit, but the boom supports are connected by ball links. So I would assume that that's pretty user-friendly. You'll just snap your links on. Again, down here on the boom, it does have a piece of heat shrink that it says in the manual to shrink down. I'm going to wait until I measure out the boom supports, and then I'll move this bracket, shrink it down, and put it back. But I could do all that off camera. That's all pretty simple. We did get the gear in, we got the belt on, and I went ahead and I tightened the heck out of this collar. Collar designs always scare me a little bit. However, due to the way that they designed the main gear, and with it being pinned up here, even without the collar on, there is literally almost no play when you pull on the main rotor. So even if the collar slipped, I still think there's a chance you could successfully bring down the model without any damage. So this particular design collar, I'm going to say yes. Some of the older models, like some of the Aligns and stuff that had just a collar and nothing else, I wasn't a big fan of those, but this one seems pretty legit. Also, let's talk tension on the belt real fast. It's got to be pretty damn tight. I actually had to have my wife help me. Two idiots pulling on a helicopter in opposite directions, and then we tightened our bolts down. Just because of the tensioning on this thing, I mean, it's very hard to see with the camera, but they're tight. I mean, they're very, very close together. Even down here on the tail end, with their new tensioning system here that they offered as an upgrade, I mean, the belt, it rides close. I don't think it's in danger of teeth eating, chewing on each other or anything, because everything is really smooth. But just make sure your belt tension is nice and tight. And again, I mean, you pull back here as hard as you can, tighten down your screws in here, and then it does provide two different pinning options. I'm going to recommend that you do not pin the tail boom until you are 110% sure that not only your belt is tight, but make sure that the tail itself is squared off. Because if you pin that boom and your tail is not in line with the machine, well, now you have holes in your tail boom that you can't fix. And then you gotta buy a new one. So I just have the batteries and ESC in here for nose weight. Once you do put on the tail, it tends to want to tip back quite a bit, so I just kind of loosely put those on there. I mean, literally, it's not even attached at all. I just set it on there. So overall, guys, I mean, I am insanely impressed. I think the machine is absolutely beautiful. It's simple, yet elegant. I mean, it has a very monstrous look to it, if you will. It looks like it could do some damage. So overall, that is going to be the final assembly. Of course, we're missing a couple components, but that'll be part of the electronics installation. I'm going to be doing the servos install. We'll look further into installing the ESC, setting up the packs, doing the tail linkage rod. All that stuff I'll do at a later time. This series of videos was meant specifically for just constructing the machine itself. So that about does it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this series and hopefully following along, learning some information. I know that I sure did. But this machine turned out to just be absolutely beautiful. I enjoy it. I cannot wait to fly it. Again, 1,000 times. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, if Freddy can fly, so can you.